When we hear the word Vatican, we think of faith, popes, St. Peter's Cathedral. But there is another side, the one that even those who serve there do not talk about. Things that do not fit into any era are stored in underground levels. Documents that cannot be copied, rooms where light does not enter, pages disappearing from the archives without a trace. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the default architecture. In this story, we will follow in the footsteps of those who tried to understand what exactly is hidden behind the perfect symmetry of the walls, and why the Vatican is not just a city. This is a form of silence. Under the ground where it is not supposed to search. Under St. Peter's Square, under the slabs on which millions walk, the second city begins. It is not marked on tourist maps, does not appear in museum catalogs, and rarely appears even in church reports. This space is not closed, it is excluded. There are no shop windows, no signs, no tour guides, only passages, steps, and halls in which the air behaves differently. The Vatican has one of the largest archives in the world, but not everything that is important is on the shelves. There is something that is stored in the body of the stone, in an underground structure, made of blocks too heavy for the era when it was supposedly built. The levels go below the catacombs, below the bones. Below is the official topography. In one of the archived letters from the time of Pius XI, there is a strange phrase: "The layers do not coincide, but they do not touch. Let them hold what they hold." Archaeologists, admitted to the lower levels at the beginning of the 20th century, discovered a fragment of a wall cut into an earlier foundation, made of basalt, which is not found in Lazio. It was perfectly polished. Above it, nothing. No mosaics, no paintings, only the corner. Sharp ideal, for no reason. These areas are not cleaned. They are bypassed. Some rooms are built on top, not for protection, but to keep people from looking down. There is an internal document, signed in the mid-1960s, which states, "Unescorted access to the hall is prohibited. Use point light without a spotlight. Stay no more than 7 minutes." In other documents, there are no mentions of Zala 5, not a single plan, not a single description, regulations only, and signatures. Those who worked in the technical services of the Vatican talked about the feeling of empty pressure in certain parts of the lower level. The electronics there do not fix interference, but the sound loses its depth. It's like walls absorb speech before it reflects. One of the drawings from the 1940s shows a room designated as Ordo 7. It is crossed out with several lines, but later its contour is repeated on the ventilation engineering scheme under the second code. There is no air, there is no current, but it's still worth filtering. When these levels were closed, they were not sealed, they were renamed, and now, if someone goes down there, he will not be in a restricted zone, but in an unmarked one, in a place where there is nothing officially. And still, it was there, according to one archive employee, that an object with no age or author was found for the first time. It was not placed in the collection. He was left in the same hall. Nothing was done with him. They simply turned off the light and closed the hall again. Rooms that are not on the diagrams. The Vatican is not just a building. This is a system of spaces built at different times by different people, according to different logic. But there are zones that do not belong to any of these layers. They are not recorded in the architectural plans, but they are known about them. Their existence is not denied. It is simply not discussed. In the reports of the internal control services, phrases like, "The premises have not been inspected, but saved," or "Access is limited due to the impossibility of linking to the register," are periodically found. What does this mean in practice? This means that there is a real space to which there are no keys, no numbering, no functional explanation. Only the door, or a passage, or just a void between the walls, in which the climate control system works for some reason. In 1978, during the remodeling of one of the administrative corridors, a room that had not previously been included in any project was opened. The room turned out to be rectangular, with perfect acoustics, without signs of decoration. The floor is made of smooth stone. The walls are seamless. Only in the center is a hole in the shape of a circle. Not a hatch, not a mine. Just a depression, the depth of which was not measured. The devices fixed it, but did not return the exact value. After that, the project was closed, and the entrance itself was bricked up. In the final documentation, this case is designated as improper space adaptation. There are few such stories, but they are, and 3 signs are constantly repeated in them: the absence of records, geometric purity, the impossibility of explaining why it was built. Some suggest that these are the remains of an earlier structure on which the Vatican itself was built. But then the question arises: why these premises have not aged like others. Why does silence seem more dense in them than the mere absence of sound? Inside one of these rooms, accidentally opened during the renovation of the electrical wiring, something was found that was not included in the inventory list. Not an object. Trace. There is a thin white print on the floor, as if someone had been sitting on their knees for a very long time. The stone beneath it was rubbed smooth, but there was no furniture in the room. There wasn't even ventilation. It was located between levels. It is technically impossible to say where you can get there at all. Everything that cannot be explained is not eliminated here. The ego is transferred to a mode of silent existence. They just don't open. They just don't take tours there. They simply bypass the accounting. And anyway, someone knows that it is there. One of the former architects of the Vatican said in an interview, "There are walls here, behind which there is no room, and there are premises beyond which there is nothing. We just don't touch them. We were not told what to do with them." A structure that cannot be understood. In the center of the Vatican, there is perfect symmetry. The geometry of the square, here's the cathedral, the layout of the buildings. Everything is built with impeccable logic. But if you look deeper, fragments that do not fit into this scheme are found in the oldest drawings. Straight lines leading to dead ends, cameras not connected to other spaces, tunnels in which the walls are built from material that does not coincide with the era. There is a so-called zero floor, a layer under the floors of the main cathedral to which only technical personnel have access. According to the documents, it is needed for maintenance. In fact, it is a branched network of corridors, many of which are not lit, equipped, and not used, but they are built, and a long time ago. In one of the sections of this level, the walls are assembled from monolithic blocks, perfectly polished. They do not carry a load. Do not miss communications, and yet they are. One of the engineers described it as the structure of the structure, a space that does not perform a function but retains its form. Why? When trying to fix this zone in detail with the help of laser scanning, a distorted image was obtained. The lines began to repeat, duplicate, as if part of the space inside did not coincide with the external contour. It's not a device error. The effect was repeated several times with different equipment. Later it turned out that at one point of this level, if you stand still, there is a feeling of deviation of symmetry. Not visual, spatial. It's as if the walls begin to disagree with your position. People described it in different ways: dizziness, a pulling sensation, disorientation. But everything is only in one place, next to a deaf ceiling, behind which nothing is registered. An oral order from the time of Pius XII has been preserved. Stone cores will not be destroyed during reconstruction. Below the signature is added by hand, even if they lead nowhere. As a result, none of these structures was touched. Also interesting is the fact that when planning new engineering units, designers artificially bypass some areas. Not for technical reasons, just don't touch here. It is not accepted to ask about it. Those who work inside say, you yourself will understand where you shouldn't drill. If in some place the space begins to resist the function, maybe it once performed another. Or continues, just not for us. Maybe the Vatican is not built on ruins, but around something that no one dares to describe, not by superstition, and because every time you approach it, the structure starts to respond. Documents that cannot be read. The Vatican is known for its archives, millions of documents stored in climatically stable halls under multi-layered access systems. There are letters of monarchs, drafts of encyclicals, shorthand reports of councils. But there is a special category among them. They are not classified, not hidden, not destroyed. They simply do not open. Within the archive system, there is a non-consolendum marking, not for viewing. Such folders are on the shelves in order in the catalog. They are indicated, available, but it is impossible to get them, not because there is no permission, and because, according to the employees, something gets in the way every time. One researcher, admitted to the archive with maximum privileges, described a situation when trying to order a specific case from the section of the Times of Innocent VIII, it appeared in the register, but they could not physically find it. On the second day, the opposite is true. The folder is on the shelf, but the number does not match any electronic identifier. We will either return it or write it off. It just remains. It seems to be there, but it is not readable. There are papers in which deadlines disappear, not physically, they cease to be perceived. The eyes see the text, but it is not possible to read it. It is as if the language is replaced by something else. The employees of the archive talk about this cautiously, calling it reading without penetration. No one has an explanation. These documents are not removed, just leave it on the shelf, and they don't return there anymore. Some documents contain pages that do not coincide in time. Paper is older than ink. The signatures do not belong to any of the known hierarchs, but the handwriting is recognizable, although it is impossible to determine exactly. In one case, the researcher tried to compare a fragment with a known writing of the 13th century, but it turned out that the symbols on the page repeat the structure characteristic of the 20th century. The archive refused to acknowledge the error. The document was left without attribution. Sometimes there are letters that cannot be copied. Scanners do not work. The image comes out blurry. Manual rewriting is impossible. Lines are broken, letters are repeated or disappear. This does not happen with all documents, but only with certain ones. Try to scan on other equipment with the same result. The text does not want to be repeated. There are also references to documents that appear in the catalog but then disappear. They are not deleted. Do not rub off. They simply lose the status of existence. They remain inside the database but are no longer called. Specialists call it a disappearing mark. Internal instructions recommend not to ask to receive such records again. The system automatically cancels the request. If history is recorded in a document, then the Vatican is not just an archive. This is a filter. Here they keep not only what happened, but also what was not given the opportunity to take place publicly. Not because it's dangerous, and because it should not have become words. Books that do not become text. The Vatican Library is one of the oldest in the world. More than 1.5 million printed publications, tens of thousands of manuscripts, scrolls, codices. But not all books can be read here. Some of them are physically present, leather bindings, gold trim, hand binding on the spine, but there is no text inside them. They are not empty. The paper is aged, the pages are numbered, and in places there are traces of faded ink. But we don't read what's left, not in the sense of language, but in the sense of structure. There are lines, but they do not lead anywhere. Each next line seems logical until you try to understand what it is about. Memory does not hold them. I once read that a person cannot tell even a general meaning. Such books are not hidden. They can be found in the main storage among others, but they are not called for copying, not scanned, not discussed. Internal documents call them moody libri, silent books. This phenomenon was first discussed at the beginning of the 20th century, when linguists studying Latin manuscripts encountered a codex that used a recognizable but non-existent language. The letters are Latin. Cases, tenses, form are logical, but they did not form into comprehensible constructions. At the same time, the text did not look abracadabra. He read himself but did not communicate anything. Modern researchers call it a semantic loop. Inside it, reading is possible, but understanding is impossible. Such books seem to imitate the transmission of meaning without carrying an ego. This is not a cipher. This is a structure not intended for perception. There are others, books that change. When rereading, the content is different. The theme remains, but the inflection, accents, and conjunctions do not match. One library employee described the experience when he compared his notes with the text a month later, and did not find a single matching chapter, although the number of pages remained the same. Some people believe that this is a feature of perception. Others are a form of protection. Protection is not from reading, but from fixing. While you are reading, the text exists. As soon as you try to take it outside, it disappears, or becomes the second. Such books are not marked in a special way. They just stand in the shadows. They are not removed. They are not taken away. They just don't return to them. Those who tried to study them for a long time, after a while, said that they stopped remembering why they started. The meaning falls apart, and all that remains is the feeling that something in these books was never a text. It only took the form of the ego to stay. Silent architecture. There are rooms in the Vatican where no one speaks, not because it is forbidden, just no one starts. These rooms are described as administrative, transitional, and technical. But everyone who worked in them notes one thing. The desire to keep silent arises by itself. This is not suppression, not fear, not religious reverence. This is the feeling that the sound is superfluous, as if the air in these walls is not intended to vibrate things. Internal circles of employees call such zones deaf windows, not in the sense of silence, but in the sense of the impossibility of being heard. Even if you speak, it seems that the words do not reach, or they are not reflected. In one of these rooms, marked on the plan as Sector M8, the ceiling is unusually low. But the acoustics are unnaturally dry. The sound in it does not buzz, does not go away, does not return. It falls apart. What engineers call absorption without a reason is felt inside. No upholstery, no special panels, no technological justification. Just a stone that does not give sound to live. When official messages were recorded in these zones, the equipment recorded the voice right before the entrance to the room. There is only silence inside, even steps, even breathing. Later, this was explained by an anomaly of the wall material. But the material is ordinary tough, as in the other halls. Only here he does not answer. There are records that in one of these rooms a person felt as if he was not there, not psychologically, and literally he stopped feeling himself in space. No loss of consciousness, not fear. And as if the body became the background, and the room itself became the theme that is felt instead of it. Priests who conducted services in neighboring rooms sometimes describe the feeling that the prayer said next to such rooms does not come to an end. The words are pronounced, but inside there is a disturbing emptiness, as if the prayer is not accepted, does not go further, remains hanging, or disappears. Some architects assume that these are the remains of ancient acoustic chambers repurposed into new buildings. But why? For whom? Why weren't they dismantled, rebuilt, or labeled? Why do they know about them, but do not touch them? When, in the 1990s, the development of a new air conditioning scheme began, part of the technical roads had to pass through these zones. The project was rejected. No explanation, simply no. These rooms remained. They were not used, but they did not close it. They serve neither purpose nor symbol. They just exist. Their walls do not receive sound. Their space does not accept a person. This is not a ban. This is a refusal. And maybe the Vatican is not silent, and it is simply built around silence, which cannot be touched. Windows that don't let anything through. In some parts of the Apostolic Palace, there are windows that, according to the documents, overlook the inner courtyard. Everything is logical on the diagrams, perspective, geometry, symmetry. But if you approach them, it becomes clear. There is nothing behind them. This is not fake, not an illusion. The window is real, frame, glass, sash. The light in it changes, cold in the morning, warm in the evening. But through the glass, emptiness. No yard, no walls, no sky, only a scattered gray background, as if the world outside the window does not load. People call them silent windows. Such windows are not uncommon. There are several of them, some of them open, but there is no air behind them, not the street, not the inner arch, just nothing. Dust does not fly inside. The sound does not pass. A hand stretched out into the opening feels cold, but not the flow of air. Not a single item thrown out was found in the yard. They once tried to explain it as reflection, double glazing, an architectural error. But with accurate measurement, it becomes clear. The outside does not exist. There is no outside this window. Neither from the roof, nor from the neighboring building, nor from the drone. The frame is not detected. The wall is deaf. One of the guards said that in the on-duty instructions for his shift, there was a note. Window 314. Do not touch the curtains. Do not light the outside. Do not take pictures. This is not a secret object, just not marked. When they asked him what he saw outside this window, he answered, "It's better not to look long. You begin to think that it is looking back." Some windows were boarded up from the inside, not for protection, and so that no one looks for an explanation. Architects claim that these openings are the result of old projects that were not fully implemented, but why are they supported then? Why does the illumination change in them? Why do they feel real until you get closer? One person who worked in the restoration service once removed the casement of one of these windows. Behind it is a smooth wall, not a seam, not a niche, just a cold stone. He tried to capture it with a camera and received a picture that showed a completely different angle, a view of the altar, which was never seen in this wing. Such anomalies are not discussed, not because they are scary and because they do not correspond to the structure of the explanation. The Vatican is an architecture in which everything makes sense. Therefore, when something appears that does not coincide with logic, it is simply left behind, let it stand. Maybe this is not a window to the world. Maybe it's a window into the structure, internal, the one that cannot be marked from the outside. And if you look at it too long, it will start to show something other than what it is, and what was here, or it will be. It's not a fact that you want to see it. A world that does not obey. The world in the Vatican is carefully calculated. The architecture was created taking into account the trajectories of the sun, the reflection from the marble, and the symmetry of the windows. Each room is designed so that the light has meaning. It directs, accentuates, emphasizes, but there are areas where the light behaves differently. Sometimes the ego is too much. Sometimes he doesn't come. Sometimes it comes from where there shouldn't be a source. People who worked in warehouses describe a soft glow that appears without lamps, without windows. It is not bright, not sharp. It is present as a belated reflection of something that has already disappeared, appears and disappears without logic. In one of the basement rooms of the archive, a case was recorded when the torch, lit for the atmosphere during the reconstruction, did not cast a shadow. Objects were thrown side by side. Chelovek, throw away. But there is no torch. There was light, but no shadows. Later, it was explained by an optical error, but the employee who conducted the measurements claimed that the device recorded the presence of light, but not the direction. There is also the opposite. Lamps that do not illuminate. They are burning, but nothing is visible. The wall remains dark, as if the space does not want to be illuminated. Such behavior of the world is difficult to describe. It works, but it doesn't work. It can be seen that he is there, but he does not report the form. In the old description of one of the repositories, it is said, "Enlightenment is broken. Surfaces lose their edge. Rectangles don't look flat. This is not poetry. This is an engineering report." In the second, it is mentioned that in some corridors, lamps give light, but this light does not give color. Everything looks like under a thick layer of dust, even if there is no dust. Some employees of the archive, working with ancient manuscripts, say that there are certain books that can be read only in indirect daylight. Artificial does not help. Direct solar, too. Only weak, scattered, coming from the window at certain times. At the second angle, the text blooms right before your eyes. During one restoration, a phenomenon was recorded. Daylight passing through a crack in the ceiling changed its direction every day by a few millimeters, which is impossible from the point of view of astronomy or construction. None of the explanations stood up to scrutiny. Then the project was frozen. The object was closed. There is no term for such phenomena in the Vatican's internal documentation. But those who work in these premises say, there is a light that wants to be seen, and there is one who does not want. And maybe it's not about the lamps, not the glass, not the architecture. Maybe there are spaces in which the light itself chooses to be or not, because what is there must remain out of sight, apart from understanding, and that's why we see him, but we don't understand what exactly he shows. Places that do not change. Most of the buildings of the Vatican underwent dozens of reconstructions. The walls were strengthened, the facades were renewed, and the floors were added. Everything changed, together with time, function, power. But there are areas that have never been touched. Not because they were protected, just because it didn't work out. One of these objects is a narrow stone corridor connecting the northern wing of the Apostolic Palace with a closed archive room. It dates back to the 14th century, but the walls are made of stone, which is not found in other parts of the building. Every time they tried to run new cables, ventilation, or even paint the surface, something got in the way. Not technique, material. It does not accept drilling. Tools break. The wall vibrates. One restorer called it a polite refusal. During one of the requests to renew the floor in the adjacent room, the workers discovered that the level of the old masonry did not coincide with the rest of the geometry. The corner of the corridor is visually straight, but during laser scanning it gave a bend of 1.5 degrees, running along the entire length. This is impossible, especially on such a scale. No architect designed it, but he is, and he does not change. In the second building, there is a small stone room without windows, fully symmetrical. It has no furniture, no function. It has not been touched since its construction. Not a single repair went there. Technical services call it an internal seam, a connection between two zones. But it does not connect. She isolates. And everyone who passes through it feels a short and very precise sensation, as if nothing around exists. Walls, sound, air disappear for a second. Then they return. No one complains. They just don't stay there longer than necessary. Some of these areas are not even old. They were built in the 20th century, but from the very beginning, they began to behave as immutable zones. One security report mentions a door that cannot be moved. Not because of the design. It's just that every time they tried to change its position, failures began in neighboring systems. The light blinked, the locks did not react, the archive did not issue the necessary documents. The door was put back in place. After that, everything became normal again. In the Vatican, there is a concept of consecratio per materia, sanctification through the thing itself. This is when the shape of the object becomes so deeply inscribed in the structure that it cannot be rebuilt, not because of the ban, because she has already become a part of something bigger. Maybe these areas did not just remain unchanged. Maybe they were created not to change, to remain an anchor, hacking a memory that cannot be processed, and everything that is around is forced to accept it. Maps that lead to the wrong place. Among the internal documents of the Vatican, especially those stored in engineering departments and architectural archives, there are schemes that do not coincide with reality. It's not about old plans, not about the drawings of the times of Pope Nicholas V, but about modern, technically verified maps made in the last 100 years, with tolerances, with signatures, with official seals. They look like standard plans, corridors, transitions, ventilation shafts, access points. But if you compare them with the physical location of the premises, some of the roads simply do not exist. There are no passages, or they lead to a wall, or to a space that never existed. These areas are not indicated in any other documents, but they repeat themselves from year to year. They are not removed, they don't rule, just add a footnote, not used. In one of the cases, an engineer engaged in updating security systems tried to follow the route indicated on the diagram. There should have been a ladder. She was not found. Instead, there is a blank wall. But what is strange? There were traces of presence. There are worn tiles on the floor as if they were walked on. In the corner is an old switch, rusty but built into the wall. He did not work, but its presence meant that something was once here. Or there is, but not now, or not for everyone. There are maps on which rooms with the same number but different locations are marked. The same identifier occurs in two places, but only one physically matches. The second is not explained. It is not contested. It just exists at the drawing level. Sometimes an error occurs in the digital archiving system. When requesting a plan of one sector, the program issues a part of the second, as if the structures overlap, not logically, and literally. People working with these schemes do not try to explain. They simply bypass such areas, and if someone asks, they say, "That's how it's built." There is also the opposite, premises that are physically present, but not on all schemes. They can be measured, documented, and captured in a photo, but they do not exist in the database. When you try to enter the coordinates, the system gives an error. The space is not allowed. Programmers explain this as a classifier failure, but the failure is not eliminated. It is not updated, and employees just get used to it. They write by hand, mark with a pencil, or not note it at all. When a few years ago, a map of the underground level was prepared for official needs, one of the lines was laid through a corridor that no one knew. It looked old, but the signs of repair were fresh, as if someone is still using the ego, only not here. Maybe it's not about errors. Perhaps the structure itself refuses to be completely fixed, as if architecture was protected from full description, not because of the ban, and because of constant displacement. And then the cards won't lie. They simply follow the space, which is constantly changing slightly so that no one reaches its center. Symbols that are not translated. Inside the walls of the Vatican, you can find hundreds of symbols. Crosses, trefoils, pentagrams, Latin abbreviations. Most of them are self-explanatory. They have an origin, a theological meaning, and a liturgical function. But there are others. They are not part of any system, not connected with any order. They are not repeated in paintings, but remain in stone. Such signs are found in places where a human foot rarely steps, at the junctions of stairs, in service passages, on the inside of doorways. They do not catch the eye. They are built in, as if someone left them not for reading, but for the very structure of the building. In one technical room under the library, a symbol resembling an inverted spiral enclosed in a square was found on a supporting column. None of the consulted theologians could identify him. Neither in the Christian, nor in the ancient, nor in the Gnostic tradition does such a sign exist. But it is cut with the same accuracy as official coats of arms, and the stone around him did not suffer. So the sign was not added later. He was part of the original masonry. The archive contains photographs of several such images taken in the 1930s. The pictures show walls that have since been rebuilt or closed. But the symbols remained. And what is strange is that when you try to digitize these photos, some details are distorted, not technically. And compositionally, lines of symbols are shifted. The angles do not match, as if the sign itself does not want to be exactly reproduced. There are also murals in which certain fragments refuse to be restored. The surface is cleaned, the paint remains. But the meaning slips away. Not a single request for interpretation gives a logical connection. The images are repeated, but do not form part of the plot. Researchers call it ritual decor without content, but they do not rule out that the meaning was encrypted not in the form, but in the way of placement. One restorer said that if you spend a long time in a room with such an ornament, you get the feeling that the pattern starts to move, inconspicuously, not at the edges, and in the center, as if the geometry deviates from the gaze without changing. This is not an optical effect, this is perception, and it does not pass quickly. Some people assume that some of these symbols do not make sense in the usual sense. They are not for humans, not for explanation, and for registration in place. As if architecture needed to be sealed not by a formula, but by a sign, not a message. A structural effort that keeps the silence. And if these signs are not read, perhaps they do not need to be read, because what they mean is not conveyed by language, but only by presence. Repositories in which nothing is put. In the internal documents of the Vatican, there are rooms designated as depositum silentis, silent storage. According to the formal classification, these are storage, archive compartments, or technological capsules for the isolation of certain items. But unlike the other archives, they are empty. They are not sealed. The person is not strictly guarded. They can be found in the plan. But no one puts anything there, and nothing comes out of it. These zones are standing. Silently, no appointment. They are marked, but not used. In one of these rooms, under the south wing, the walls are made of unmarked gray stone. No shelves, no lighting. Only a smooth floor, a closed passage, and the feeling that something already lies in it, although everything is empty. Several people who were inside described a similar feeling, as if the room was already occupied, although no one could see anything in it. An attempt to use this room in 1995 for a temporary storage of liturgical vessels failed. Metal objects began to oxidize faster than they should, not catastrophically. It's just that everything is old inside. The fabric turned yellow, the paper darkened, even the lamps burned out more often. The storage was returned to its original state, empty. There are others. Some have persistent cold, not technological, not caused by the shadow. It's just that the stone in them never heats up, even in summer. Even if the temperature rises in neighboring rooms, it is always the same in these, and always slightly below the norm. One of the employees of the technical service said that during the inspection of the ventilation shafts, he found a section through which air did not pass. Not because of congestion, he just didn't want to go there. The devices showed negative pressure. After the measurements, they said, malfunction, but they did not do anything, just fixed, does not function, and they never came back. The very existence of such spaces begs the question, why build, mark, preserve a room in which nothing happens? There is no answer. Officially, a reserve. Unofficially, the zone that we do not touch. Perhaps these places were built as capsules, not for storing things, but for keeping a fortune. As if the Vatican itself understood, there are fragments that cannot be moved, cannot be used, cannot be interpreted, but must be kept within limits, so that they do not go beyond the boundaries of architecture. And then such warehouses are not empty rooms. These are structural seals, stone forms intended not for function, but for limiting something that can no longer be understood, but still must be isolated. Not hidden, simply left in silence, because any interference can break not the thing, but the balance, mechanisms that should not work. Sometimes during restorations or translations of engineering systems, employees come across devices whose origin cannot be established. They are built into the walls, often behind a layer of plaster, without marking and connection to known communications. At first glance, old valve assemblies, couplings, boxes, but they do not lend themselves to analysis. Inside there are structures that do not match the technological level of the era. In one of these finds, a small box built into the wall between two archives, an element resembling a complex rotor was discovered. He did not rotate. But when the devices approached, in particular, scanners and cameras, a light vibration of the air began. This is not an electromagnetic field, and not a thermal effect. Just the space began to pulsate slightly. The ego was left behind, unexplained. In another case, restorers came across a resonance panel hidden behind a wall cross. The panel was made of a translucent material not identified in the analysis. When touched, she made a low, almost inaudible sound, not mechanical, but as if from somewhere outside. There were no symbols on it, only an internal grid similar to a map, but no one understood the map of what. Such objects are not deleted. They are not disposed of. They do not work with them. The Vatican is not destroyed. He leaves, and he puts it on top, something familiar. Cross the ladder, a plate. Most likely these mechanisms are not from the past. They were built in to hold something, or pass it on, or fix it, not to people, but to the structure, and all that's left is just don't touch it, because if it hasn't stopped yet, maybe stopping it is worse than leaving it on. Schedules that do not correspond to time. Inside the Vatican, everything is subject to a strict rhythm. Services, ringing of bells, changes of guard, opening of archives. But there are documents that record events that do not fit into known schedules. The minutes, drawn up to the minute, record meetings, movements, which never took place. Or more worryingly, they happened, but not on the days when they were supposed to. The archive contains a folder with logs of access to closed premises. In one of them, there is a sign about the entrance to the hall, which has long been taken out of use. The time is indicated, 3:11 at night. The scanner fixed the signal. But no one was passing through the cameras at that moment. After 2 minutes, repeated activation, same point, same route, but no traces. And all this, on a day when the facility was considered closed for repairs. In other cases, employees mention internal clocks that show non-existent time. In the room where there are no windows and electronic devices, the mechanical clock began to count the 27th minute of the hour. It repeated several times, then returned to normal. No one began to replace the mechanism, they just removed the arrows. In one of the journals of 1961, an event with the participation of people whose names do not exist in any list is indicated. Their positions are fictitious, but the signatures stand, and the font on the letterhead is official. Only the date does not correspond to any liturgical system, as if something strange had appeared inside the ordinary day. Sometimes it seems that the Vatican is not just passing the time. He contains different layers of his ego. Somewhere it flows faster. It freezes somewhere. And somewhere there are moments that the official history does not mention, but which nevertheless take place, just out of sight. There is no explanation, but it's still inside the walls. That which cannot be documented. An archive is not just a storage of paper. This is a memory structure. But the Vatican has known for a long time. There are things that cannot be fixed. They occur, but cannot be registered. Because their very description is already a distortion. Employees of archives and security services talk about events that could not be entered in the report, not because they cannot be named, and because after writing the text seems incorrect. Words are constructed, phrases are logical, but the meaning is not retained. After a while, after a day, no one can tell what exactly happened, and the document which seems to exist is read as empty. One technician said that after a night patrol, he tried to record an unusual sound, a dull pulse repeating every 23 seconds. He made a note, made a description, indicated a point, under the stairs in the south wing. A day later, the file disappeared. The paper remained. But there is no sound or coordinates in it. Only structure, no content. As if the fixation request itself was deleted. The internal rules of the Vatican do not prohibit describing such cases. They just don't encourage it. There is even an unofficial term, nullum actum, non-performed action. This is not a mistake, not hiding. This is the recognition of the border beyond which something that cannot be entered into the archive begins. Maybe there are more than just rooms, books, or artifacts in these walls. Maybe there is an experience that cannot be transferred, and the Vatican knows it, and he doesn't hide it, and it simply does not fix. Because what is not documented has not disappeared, it simply remained itself. And perhaps this is the only way to preserve what should not become part of the language.